Hey, welcome back to my channel. If you are new here, then hi, my name is Erica, and today I am going to be talking about language and particularly the language we use surrounding disability. Now, I know this can be a bit of a controversial topic, but I'm hoping that when you get through this video, you will have learned something, and maybe all have learned something from what people say in the comments. So to start off, I'm going to be discussing two different types of language that are used to identify disability. The first language I'm going to be talking about is known as person first language. Why is my dog trying to get off the couch? Okay, so person first language is when you say person with a disability or person with autism, or like whatever the disability is, you start off as person with. And the second type of language I'm going to be talking about is known as identity first language, which is basically disabled person or autistic person or whatever the disability is or the identity is basically used as an adjective before the word person. Now first I want to give a bit of background about where person first language came from. And again, as a reminder, person first language is person with a disability. Person first language largely was popularized by people with intellectual disabilities. And people with intellectual disabilities formed an advocacy group called People First, and that was largely where the idea of person first language came from. And you have to remember that people with intellectual disabilities are especially stigmatized within like the larger disability community. So it's understandable that people with intellectual disabilities would want to reaffirm their personhood, because historically people with intellectual disabilities have been dehumanized, and to a certain degree people with all types of disabilities have been dehumanized. Why can I not talk today? But more so with people with intellectual disabilities. And I think part of that is we live in a society that is obsessed with this idea of like, if you are not like a rationally thinking or an introspective person in the traditional sense, then you are somehow less valuable. And okay, so I just want to clarify something here real quick, because I think in the video I did a pretty crappy job of explaining it, and I just want to make sure that my point is not misconstrued, and also I want to make sure that I am not offending anybody here. But when I say like intellectual people with intellectual disabilities are viewed as not rationally thinking and introspective, I'm talking about that as how society views people with intellectual disabilities, and how society automatically assumes that they're not introspective and they're not rationally thinking, when it's like those things are not mutually exclusive to people without intellectual disabilities. Just because somebody thinks differently than you or has different intellectual capabilities does not mean they're any less. And also, our understanding of intellectual disabilities as a whole it's incomplete, because think about it. Things like IQ tests and stuff are skewed to put people that can put their thoughts into words and stuff like that. It's heavily skewed to make those people seem better than people who may not be able to really put their thoughts into words. And I just think our perception of people with intellectual disabilities as a whole is not just wrong, but it's gross. Like, you know, and then there's that idea of an unexamined life is not worth living. Well, it's like, who gets to decide what makes an examined life? And anyway, who gets to decide what life is worth living? And that's just what I really wanted to get across there in that bit. I'm sorry if I didn't describe it fully, because I really don't want to hurt anybody, and I just want to make sure that people are understanding of how much our culture really discriminates against and just looks down upon people with intellectual disabilities. So that is what I wanted to say. We need to move away from that. We need to understand that there are different ways to be human, and that doesn't make anybody less than. But identity first language, which is what I typically use, especially when describing myself, is largely used by physically disabled people. And a lot of the reason why a lot of physically disabled people use identity first language, and particularly why I use it, is I view my disability as part of my identity. I don't think I can be separated from my disability because it's part of who I am. And also, I think part of stigmatizing disability requires understanding that having a disability does not make me any less of a human being, and because of that, I don't really see a reason to have to reinforce my personhood. Look at my munchkin in the back. But I don't see my disability as a contradiction to my humanity. If anything, I see it as part of my humanity. And one of the things I have noticed is rehabilitation professionals or anybody that works with disabled populations. I've noticed a lot of people will, the default will be person first language. And while that's not inherently problematic, the issue I have is I've had a lot of people in my life argue with me when I refer to myself as a disabled person, or if I'm talking about disability generally and I say disabled people. I don't think it's up to non-disabled people to police the language of disabled people, because ultimately the language we use to identify ourselves is very personal, and it gives us a sense of identity and an ability to control our identity. And I'm making this video not to say that one thing is better than another, but rather to remind everybody that language is very personal. So if you are talking to somebody who's actually disabled, and I say actually disabled people because I don't know if necessarily you have to respect how other people want to classify disability if they are not in that community. But if you're talking to somebody who's disabled and they use either identity first or person first language, and if you've been told that language is not acceptable, it's not up to you to tell somebody how they can and cannot talk about their own community. It's different if somebody is saying something inherently harmful or ableist, like if a physically disabled person who does not have an intellectual disability is using the R word. Like, that is not okay because that is a slur. Or if, and I talked about this in my Shane Burke video, but when Shane Burke like made fun of people with intellectual disabilities, and he tried to like differentiate himself from people with intellectual disabilities. And like that is something you can be like, hey, no, that's not right. But as far as language goes, and the language that people use to identify themselves and their community, I don't think anybody really has a right to tell somebody, no, because I learned this in school, you cannot say it that way. So yeah, that was what I really wanted to say today, and I will put some links in the description to like in different books that I've read that talk about different types of language, and also just the history behind it, so that if you want to do some further reading, you can. Thank you so much for watching. If you liked it, please give it a big thumbs up, and if you have not already and you would like to see more of my content, please consider hitting that subscribe button. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope to see you again next time. Bye.